I hope you were able to complete the lab successfully. In the first part of the lab, I pretty much give you the code you need to enter step by step, kind of explaining how you make the different columns. Let's take a look at the solution here for the first part of the lab.
This video is brought to you by ObbyPies Academy.
And there we go. So with this lab solution, you can see here, it's pretty simple, but as we make it less wide, that column, that sidebar 5 columns escapes underneath the 7 columns. Take a quick look at the code here. Even though it's given to you in the lab, let's take a moment and go over it. So we'll go ahead and open this inside our brackets text editor. And here we go. Let's close up this other stuff so we don't get confused. So we have kind of this templated head for the document, which takes care of some of the problems with older versions of Internet Explorer. You can see IE 7 is even mentioned here, and I don't know anyone who's still using that. IE 8 and 9. We load the viewport with the width equals device width. We change up the style sheets to add the foundation.css and app.css style sheet. And then we add the script modernizer.foundation.js. The code is pretty much as given to you in the lab. We have a row. That's a 12-column row for the header, and that gives us the header 12 columns that you can see right here. So 12 columns across. We then have another row, which is 12 columns, but that's divided by another row, which is 7 columns and 5 columns. Pretty quickly, you realize that this foundation framework is just rows within rows. So there's 7 and 5 as they're laid out. And finally, the bottom row here is 12 columns. So we have H2 footer 12 columns. That's what's written in there. But you can see that class 12 columns again gives us 12 columns across. So that was the first part of the lab. The second part of the lab was a little more difficult, in which I had you take a design that was designed using traditional floating techniques and move this into something that was responsive using the foundation framework. So you can see using the traditional techniques here obviously doesn't work well. So the object was to apply foundation to this and make this responsive friendly using foundation. So the code you started with was the same as the solution code from the lab in the previous chapter. And what I want you to do was add the foundation framework around this in order to give us a good solution. So let's take a look at the solution. So there it is in the browser. And of course, as we make it smaller, works just fine. So now let's take a look at it in our text editor. So again, we have that templated head with all of the stuff for old versions of IE. The only thing in the style sheet that I have, you may have done this differently, is just styling the image with a 200 pixel width, 1 pixel solid black border, and a 5 pixel margin. Other than that, it's pretty much as you'd expect. The initial row is 12 columns. That has news about nothing and all the news that's fit to post. So let's see here. Let's one last time bring this into the browser. So there's our news about nothing and all the nothing news that's fit to post. And you can see that that comes from this code right here from this row. So this spans all the way across the design. Now the next section you can see is 3 different columns. So we had to separate that using the rows feature. So the way I did that was we have, of course, our 12 column row, which goes all the way across. And inside that, we've got a div for 3 columns. Airliner takes off, lands normally. Airliner takes off, lands normally, and the text that follows it. Once that div ends, we then have a 6 column div. Worker goes to work and comes home. Brave worker calls it just another day. So that gives us this middle column of content that contains the image. So there's our middle column of content, our image right there, and the text that follows. The final column is 3 columns. So we have a 3 column for the first width. Add 6 columns to that, that's 9 columns. And then finally, we have another 3 columns. We have a total of 12 columns, getting us all the way across the page. Then the final bottom part here, the footer way down here, that's again 12 columns because we want that to go all the way across and put in our copyright notification. I hope you agree with me that this foundation framework makes laying out your page extremely easy and also makes responsive design extremely easy. You just have to understand how to lay out the columns. It gives you a good guideline for your layout as you create more complex designs geared towards the web.